Air Force launched 57 ships. Navy launched 59. So naval operation turned out to be more extensive than our own that we planned for so many months, and they put it together. Well, the plan, I don't know, that was took about a week, but in less than 2 days, they marshaled all of the aircraft for the support. Now, so after JIGDAG says all of this, okay, Boot Hill, you go to each carrier and brief them. And of course, everything had to be in secret, a limited number of plans and all of that. And then they find out, but instead of 21st, we're going on a 20th. So they lost 24 hours.
So quick question for you. So all of these aircraft are organic to the carriers except the P3. So where were the P3s coming out of?
No, P3s were based in Guam, but they had a detachment. They would rotate out of Da Nang. So
there was already a P3 detachment stationed in Da Nang? Or they sent one specifically for the mission?
I did know it when I wrote the book. My book gives you the impression that the P3 came out of Guam. It was based at Guam, but it actually was launched
they don't have the legs
at Da Nang.
to get there.
It was launched in Da Nang.
And so did they pre-position them for the mission specifically from Guam to Da Nang?
No.
They just happened to be there?
It was part of their normal...
okay.
Because see, they were monitoring the South Vietnam, so that was a continuing operation. It was just this, for the first time,
right,
in the tour of many of these airplanes.
So basically...
You're going to go north now.
Yeah.
You're going to go...
So basically what you're saying, the Navy didn't spare any asset that they had.
That is correct.
They got every single one of them involved.
They pulled all the stuff. In secret.
Wow.
And very quickly...
And destroyed the plan afterwards.
And very quickly, and at the time when Barchard was at QB Point, he didn't have 3 carriers.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I'm going to have him by the 21st.
I'm going to have him soon. He knew it was coming.
And then 24-hour advance. So it was fantastic. So here you have Boot Hill goes from one carrier to another, and it was... Well, I can't see something like that happening at the Air Force Base. Of course, you deal with lots of real estate, and people live at home. They have families and all of that. Blah blah blah. You're on a carrier. It's a huge carrier, but you're there, and your only duty is that hey, you're alerted. You go to your briefing room, and actually, the individual tasks of all of these airplanes that flew these tracks were simple. They had the tracks. This is where you fly. They had the sequence, how many seconds apart you drop your flares and all of that. They were able to do that. There were no specific targets to hit. And they were relatively safe because they stayed out of harm's way. So it was a brilliant plan. They planned not to lose any airplanes or not to have anybody shot down.
Right.
But what happened? More missiles were launched at the Navy than at the Air Force. 20 missiles were launched at the naval aircraft that stayed out of the kill zone. But in their frustration, the North Vietnamese saw that the Navy did not really penetrate close enough. They still fired them off. And
six airplanes wouldn't have gotten that response.
That's right. And
but waves and waves of aircraft.
That's right.
They were compelled
It just continued and continued.
Well, and anyway, I guess for people that are listening to this again, that aren't maybe historians of the Vietnam War or really understand it. So there's a trade-off. If you're a SAM missile site, you're trying to protect your homeland. But the second you turn that radar on, you've painted your location.
Yes.
And when you fire that missile, you have really painted that location for SAM suppression. So the fact that they were compelled to fire 20 missiles at the force that the Navy really exposes how frightened they were and how real they thought the threat was.
Yes, they were panicking.
Which shows that the Navy was absolutely convincing that there's some major thing going on.
The Navy fired only 2 missiles, and both were fired by the commander of Iron Hand. Iron Hand was the SAM suppression.
Yep.
And he said, we were never close enough to really destroy a SAM site, but he violated the rule. It wasn't really a violation because they were not to dispense ordnance unless they were fired on.
Okay, so he did what he had to do to protect himself.
But they were fired on, but they knew it was not effective.
Right.
So Ham Bing, they called him Ham, but it was Commander Bing. He fired 2 strike missiles, and both of those strike missiles were recovered. They landed in the rice paddies. He knew he wouldn't hit anything. He just lobbed them.
But it probably got them to think about turning their kit off because they could see that they were taking fire.
Well, anyway, that he should have been chastised for doing that because he violated the rules of engagement.
Whatever
he did,
yeah.
And I don't know whether the Navy initially denied that or not, but the Defense Secretary Laird, in a press interview in Washington, said that Navy did not drop a single bit of ordnance. And here the next day in Warsaw newspapers, they show 2 fins from strikes that Bing fired. And they had numbers and all of that. So, it was eventually traced. Yes, they came off Oriskany. So it was, who knows, he might have been retired after that before everything was really verified. But first was the denial by, this is Blair lied. And North Vietnamese claimed that 47 people were killed around Haiphong area. I mean, it was completely false.
Right.
It was just propaganda.
Well, so something that you said about the going back to, they essentially set an MCON condition that said no mail. From the time you open this document and start reading the plan, no mail leaves the ship. So in modern day, today, that's an MCON condition where they essentially, because young sailors on ships these days can email.
Yeah.
Which is like crazy to me. But I mean, I did it towards the end of my career and I still thought it was crazy. I couldn't believe I could communicate with people via email. But the second an event happens, like if an aircraft crashes going off the catapult, they turn the internet off right away so that people aren't leaking, purposely or unpurposely, so the media doesn't get a handle on what happened. But I can't imagine. So that is a signature, but it's a signature you control. So the crew knew something was coming.
Yeah.
If I've been in battle on a ship before, launching from a ship, and the moment that they, excuse me. Desert dust is getting me, and whatever we blew through the wall. The second that you restrict people's ability to communicate, so back then it was by mail, now it would be like, I can't send an email, and all they know is that when they go to connect, they can't. People generally know on the ship something's about to go down. Something is going on, but they have nobody to tell it to but themselves.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine in those battle groups with the scuttlebutt, we call it in the Navy, right? The scuttlebutt is you know what a scuttlebutt is?
Yes.
The scuttlebutt is the water fountain on a ship, and it's also gossip. because that's where people gossip, is at the water bubbler, right? So I cannot imagine what the scuttlebutt on the ship was as soon as they were like, you can't send any mail. And they might have done it to the effect that they were like, well, you can write letters and the mail will pile up. We're just not putting any cods. And you would be shocked. You would think that a sailor in a boiler room on a ship wouldn't know. He writes a letter and he puts it in there's post office boxes on the ship all over, and you just put it in there, and it's like being in a small village. But gossip on a ship spreads that fast.
Yeah.
And they also people watch on the ship to see if the mailbags are going on the cods and coming off. So that the fact that something was up wouldn't have survived 24 or 48 hours. I just think it's an interesting side note that, and the Admiral Barcharge was certainly aware of that. And so I think the way he comported himself is really impressive, because he had a very keen understanding of his reaction of his people. And it was during a time where they were ripping a group out and a new group was coming in. And he did, I mean, I can't think of how he could have done this any better, moving his command staff to Kubi and bringing people in tight that were outliers that he needed, bringing them from the United States to him, and then subverting himself, because that's not it's not what Navy admirals do. Navy admirals land on a ship and they plant their flag, and he did the opposite of that. So I'm just really impressed.
The word I had, this is from Jig Dog Ramage.
Yeah.
I said, throughout the operation, he was there at launch when the first ships were launched. Then he went to the war room and monitored radio communications. So he knew what was happening. Of course, he knew the plan. He knew when this way, where they were, so he could visualize that. But Jig Dog Ramage, he was mobile. He was mobile.